You gotta move closer, dummy. Closer. What a dummy. Closer. 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 That'll do.
Wethington. Wethington.
So how do you take good pictures with your Instax camera? My name is David. I'm with WethingtonPhoto.com, and I'm going to help you take some better photos with your Instax camera. I got my first Instax camera a few months ago. I really did it because I wanted to do something other than digital photography. I've been doing digital photography for about 4 or 5 years now. And I was really just looking to broaden my horizons in the photography world. I was wanting to get into film photography, but there's quite a high barrier of entry to get into it. You have to know how to do the film, how to develop it, how to get the chemicals, how to manage all that, especially with a kid in the house. I didn't want to worry about any of that, so I decided to go with instant film. After price comparisons, I went with Instax over Polaroid. The film is a lot more reasonable price than the Polaroid, and there's more cameras available. So how do we take better pictures with it? I've got a list of my top tips that will help you take better photos. These are directly applied to Instax cameras, the Instant, but they will be applied generally across the board for any type of photography. You can apply these tips to taking photos of your kids with your cell phone, to the disposable cameras, to a top-of-the-line DSLR. These tips will help you take better photos, and here they are. Tip number 1 is you got to fill the frame. If you think about it, photography is about seeing the world through a little window. And if we don't show the world what we see through that window, then we can miss the point. One of the things that photographers get into when they're learning photography is not filling that window. Every photographer deals with it. We just need to make sure that what we line up with a viewfinder is what we want the world to see. So when you're doing it, take a quick look around the corner, around the edges of the frame, and make sure that there's nothing in there that is distracting or misleading. A problem that I have and still struggle with after years is on portraits I'll cut off the bottom of the hands for some reason, and I see it, and I just know that if I could step back an inch or two, I will be plenty of space to make sure I don't cut off the fingers. So tip number 1 is fill the frame. Tip number 2 is to crouch down for kids. One of the best tips that I can tell you as a parent or anybody taking photos of kids or people generally shorter than you is to crouch down on their eye level. One of the things that we'll do as a photographer is we'll just take a photo right from the eye level, and if we're taking pictures of kids, usually that's taking pictures of the top of their head or the top of the kid looking up like that. And if we crouch down, maybe get down on one knee, we'll see the world straight at them. And this will help you take better photos of your kid. I had my wife apply this rule and taking photos from our kid from a year or two ago to today is astronomically better. Even taking pictures of the dog, getting down on the ground to take pictures of the dog at his level instead of human level, where we see the world every day. Just dropping down a little bit adds a layer of interest to the photo. So tip number 2 I have for you is if you have kids or anything that's smaller than you, crouch down. You will get better photos. Tip number 3, similar to crouching down for taking photos of kids, one of the best tips we can do if we got friends or anybody that we're taking photos that are a little bit taller is to stand on a stool. It may be a little embarrassing, but it's something you have to do. I've had to do it on senior shoots where the senior's just a little bit taller than I am, and I don't want to shoot up the nostrils, so I'll just stand on a little stool or something that'll get me up to their level. So tip number 3 I have for you is if you're taking photographs of somebody taller, just to get to their level as well, if you're taking portrait. Tip number 5, take your time. When shooting with digital cameras, it's easy to just shoot and shoot and shoot, and we can delete later. But when we're shooting with instant film, Instax cameras, we really have to make sure we take our time. Each time we press that shutter button, we are spending money. Each one of those films costs anywhere from $1 to $1.50 a slide. So take our time. Some of the things that we can run through the settings of the camera before we take the photo is to make sure that in the viewfinder we have the frame filled and we have everything in the photo frame that we want. Anything that we don't want, if we're taking a picture of somebody on the street and there's a trash can, slightly moving to the side can get rid of the trash can, get the subject in focus. Another thing that I like to go through is on the Mini 90 is macro mode. Macro mode is underused, excuse me. One of the things I keep in mind is if I can touch the subject, I am in macro mode. I may not be taking pictures of flowers, I may be taking pictures of portraits. What I do most of the time, and in fact most of the time when I'm taking pictures of portraits, I am in macro mode because I'm getting close enough to the subject to fill the frame. So go through those settings real quick, fill the frame, make sure everything's in there, recheck your angles, make sure that if you got your flash on or off, depending on you, go through those, make sure they're where you want them. It only takes an extra second or two, especially after you get the hang of it a couple of times. You can really diminish the amount of bad photos you take just by taking an extra minute or two, or extra 5-10 seconds even, to make sure you got the right settings and the right the right shot in mind. So that's the next tip for you. Take your time. Tip number 6. This one maybe costs a little bit more than expected or desired, but it's photography. We have to be willing to experiment. We have to be willing to take a bad photo. Some of the worst photos in the world can lead to better photos. I know I've taken some horrific photos and then taken some really good ones right there back to back. Just trying different things, trying different angles, taking the photo, experimenting. If you learn that this shot from this angle looks good for this portrait, you can apply it to the next one, cutting down on your costs and you're experimenting on the next time, putting it all into a memory bank of knowledge that will help you be a better photographer. So don't be afraid of a bad photograph. I know that a lot of people like to show their highlight reels when it comes to photography, but know that every single photographer has taken bad photos. You are not different. I am not different. I've had to delete a lot of photos. I throw the bad Instax photos away. It's just one of those things. We're in photography. We're going to take bad photos. If you're into soccer, you're going to whiff on the ball. Baseball, you're going to strike out. Riding bikes, you're going to crash. Photography, we'll take bad photos. Don't be afraid to experiment a little bit. Tip number 7, break the ice. When you're out on the social situation or in a gathering, especially with people that are in like-minded crowds, familiar people, friends of friends, one of the things you can do as a photographer is use your instant film camera, the Instax camera, to break the ice. Offer to take a photo. I like to take a picture of the picture so that I can keep it, and then I give that photo away. Introduce myself. I let people know that I'm a photographer. Sometimes this will lead to work down the line. I don't know. Don't be afraid to break the ice. It can be a little bit intimidating to be a photographer sometimes, but getting out there, putting yourself out there can make you develop as a photographer, as a person, social skills, and even sales, which is needed to be a photographer. So don't be afraid to break the ice. Tip number 8, right in line with breaking the ice, is share the photos. One of the coolest things we've had as a kid are our little photos from the Polaroid days. One of the coolest things that we can do today as an Instax camera photographer is to share the photos. Give them away to friends, family, friend to friends, people you meet on the street. If you take their photo, give it to them. Like I said before, I take a photo of that photo so that I have a copy of it for my records or for my collection. But don't be afraid to give that photo away. All right, tip number 9, use natural light. One of the most beautiful lights in the entire world is natural light. While I'm sitting here in front of a flash umbrella shooting with studio lights, there's nothing more breathtaking than seeing golden hour with the sunset, seeing that nice soft warm light. So don't be afraid to use natural light. It can be a little less intimidating once you get to know it, before more familiar with it. Use the hand palm trick for the shadows to figure out where the best light is. Get used to it, embrace it. Look for the shadows under the nose and the eyeballs. That's a good sign that you're in horrible light. Don't bother taking photos of that. If you see that, move them to the shade or behind a building. Even using the sun to bounce off a building back onto the subject is a good way to use natural light to take some good portraits. And then also using natural light to take environmental photos as well. Landscape, cityscape, all those are good for, obviously good for natural light as well. Just make sure you're shooting at good times with good light too, especially with instant film. You're going to spend some money to take it, so make sure it's not too dark and it's not too bright. You got to find that golden zone, that golden hour, that key ratio. Once you find that, you'll find some good light and you'll be able to take some good photos using natural light. So that's my next tip, is use natural light. Tip number 10, modify the flash. And all the Instax cameras that have flash, they are all direct flash. Some of them you can't even shut off. They are straight on direct flash, which is the least flattering flash that's available in photography. So one of the best ways that we can handle that is just to modify it. Mini 9 has some gels that you can throw over the flash to make the color a little bit different. Even grabbing white tissue paper and putting it over the flash just a little bit can soften that flash just enough to take the edge off, make it a little bit more flattering. If you are a photographer and you have some other modifiers, mag mod, putting the mag bounce over it can help modify it as well. Gary Fong has a bunch too. Anything that you can use to modify or diffuse that flash will help you take better photos while using your flash. So my next tip is modify the flash. Tip number 11, get closer than you think. When you're taking a photo with the Instax, you got to keep in mind that you have to move pretty close in order to fill the frame, especially when taking portraits. I mainly take portraits, especially of my son. One of the best things you can do is to move closer, especially if you're taking photos of an environment. You want to make sure you get the right subject, the right material in the frame to take the good photo and to relate what you're seeing with your eye. Usually when you're taking the photo, it'll be a little different than what you naturally see. You'll take the photo and everything will be a little bit farther off than what you anticipated. So the next tip is to move a little closer. Tip number 12, use the macro for portraits as well. One of my favorite things to do, especially with the Mini 90, is to use the macro mode to take portraits. I have a rule that if I can touch the subject, I am in macro mode. I know it's got the little flower on it, it's universal, but with the focus mode it's only 2-3 feet. I can't remember what it is right now. You're closer than that when taking a portrait if you're filling the frame. So when you're taking a portrait, if you have macro mode available, try switching into macro. You'll be happy with what you see. So my next tip, use macro mode for things other than flash. The next tip I have is to take care of the photos. The digital world, especially with online backup, makes us spoiled in a way that we can not even worry about our photos anymore, which is nice. It's nice having pretty much every photo you take backed up in the cloud that you can look on another device and even on another person's device on a computer with a sign-in. With the instant film, we don't have this luxury, so we have to take care of them. We can get ourselves a good album, a good box, and just make sure that we take care of them. They will last pretty much indefinitely as long as we do take care of them. Keep them out of direct sunlight, out of high heat and high humidity, and also the cold, damp are bad for the photos as well. So be sure to take care of your photos. My next tip is to start some personal projects. Some of the personal projects we can do are portraits of family members, loved ones, friends, colleagues. One of the things I did not too long ago is I did a personal project of taking pictures of my son's toys, where I would take a picture of his toy, him playing with a toy. He would be in the frame a little bit, but he was never the main part, and almost never did it show his face. It was usually just his hand holding the truck or him pushing a truck away. It was pretty cool. I can look back at that project and see the toys that he played with throughout the years. Seeing him play with the toys while I've got a lot of pictures of him. I've got pictures that remind us of what he was playing with during the time periods. Let me know, what are some of the personal projects that you would like to start? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you guys. All right, I've given you a list of things that help you take better instant film photos. On my website, I have a list of 20 tips to help you take better photos. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. Let me know in the comments, what do you think is the best tip that you could give somebody to help them take better photos? And before I go, I'd like to give a shout out and a thank you to Justin for making the music for the videos. I owe you, not big, just a little, because everybody knows that music is easier than photography. See it.